Council work session. And Chris, thank
Hi.
you.
Yeah,
And
hi.
we will keep it relevant to the business of City Council.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I always do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Christopher Diley. I'm homeless in Laramie, and I'm following up on on last night regarding the Board of Health being eliminated, which was part of the public hearing last night. I thank the mayor for explaining,
Yes, sir.
the distinction between the Board of Health and the Public Health Department. What I wanted to point out is that why I still oppose the elimination of the Board of Health is that I feel that it can be helpful, because I have been helped by when I was in San Luis Obispo, California, about 20 years ago, I was helped by their Board of Health when I was able to address them regarding Lyme disease. I had a Lyme disease diagnosis, and I was being prescribed too many antibiotics, far too many antibiotics. So by having a board present to hear me, there were that many people that were able to vet the issue. And one man spoke out and he said, "That's way too many antibiotics." And he stopped me from taking those antibiotics, which was really helpful, because that could have involved the prolongation of the QT interval, which causes heart damage. So that was like a very helpful experience I had by addressing the Board of Health on a health issue. Now, because of last night, I thought, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll take up my current issue, I'll take it to the public health tomorrow morning. But I don't have nearly the amount of confidence of addressing a receptionist at the public health as I would by addressing a Board of Health, with numerous people there. I can be like stymied, right when I go in the door tomorrow morning, and not get any further. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that I think the Board of Health, I oppose it. I think it can be very helpful, and I oppose it. So
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to our work session for this evening, specific purpose excise tax discussion. And we will begin with Director Wade, our Director of Finance.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. We appreciate you joining us for this work session this evening, where our goal is, my goal for the presentation is to provide you with some educational information to get you ready for really important conversations about the county specific purpose excise tax. As you know, you have a joint work session scheduled with the county commissioners and the town council of Rock River on next Monday. And so we wanted to prepare you with just some general information, so going into that work session, you felt a little bit more prepared. That first work session is going to be a little bit more educational in nature. We're going to talk about, I just saw the agenda today that the county proposed. We're going to talk about the election, timing for the tax, the nature of the tax, how the governing bodies might think about setting the maximum amount for the tax, and those types of things. And so that's what you can expect next week, and that's what we're getting you ready for today. Assistant City Manager Todd Fieser is going to join a little bit later to provide a kind of preview of some city projects we're thinking about, and also ask you for some input on the same thing. But this is certainly not the only conversation we're having about that. There'll be much more detailed conversations later this fall where we'll get really specific into that project prioritization. So again, we're trying to do lots of education to make sure that everyone feels really comfortable moving into these important conversations for our county. You'll notice that in the title slide, I put ensuring fiscal sustainability for Albany County and its incorporated municipalities. And that's a point I'm going to talk about a lot tonight. This is absolutely not a city tax. This is an Albany County tax, and it benefits the county, the city, and the town of Rock River. And we'll talk more about that tax structure in a minute. We'll go to the next slide. So for my part of the agenda today, we'll review current sales and use taxes in Albany County. I just want to check and see for folks in the back of the room if we're getting the same interference on the screen, because that's really tough. Could we try to fix this? Yeah, so we don't, yeah.
We can't fix the flipping. IT has ordered parts for replacement, so we're waiting for those parts to come in.
Yeah. Would it be appropriate, Mayor, to ask for a brief pause just to make sure that we can get some materials out? Thank you for that.
We will take a 5-minute pause. Will that be enough?
That should be.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
a 5-minute pause.
We can still see it in, right? We can still see on our computer. Oh,
It wasn't sent to us.
Yes. I will, if you will email the final.
will be helpful. We will resume the meeting. Director Wade, welcome.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, members of the public, thank you so much for your flexibility in responding to our technology crisis here in the room. We are on, I will cue you, we are on slide 2 of the presentation where I'll give a brief overview of the agenda. First, we'll review current sales and use taxes in Albany County, just to make sure we all know what we're talking about when we say sales and use taxes in our county. I'll give you some general information about the current specific purpose excise tax. We'll call that the SPET. That is what I heard Todd Bishop, our municipal advisor, call it a few weeks ago, and I think that that is a more correct term than the SPT. I'll present to you a 25-year summary of approved SPET taxes, and we'll start talking about planning for the 2026 tax. We are moving on to slide 3 in the presentation. So as you all know, there is a 6% sales and use tax rate in Albany County, but many people don't know where that comes from. 4% of that tax is the state of Wyoming's tax. It's their sales and use tax. The amount is not voter approved. It's coded in state statute. 1% is a local sales and use tax for general purposes. We often call that the 5th cent. 99% of that amount stays in our community and supports local government funding. Again, that's the county, City of Laramie, and the town of Rock River. The 1% local specific purpose excise tax, the SPET, that must be used for specific projects that voters approve on the ballot is what we're talking about this evening. So the 4% state, 1% general purpose option, 1% specific purpose option, our total are 6% taxes. 99% of the specific purpose tax also stays in Albany County for use in local government funding. If you take a look at the state's 4% sales tax, they do distribute some of that to local government, and it's important to point that out. 1% comes off the top for counties, but that's to administer the tax. And so just like the state keeps some money from the 5th cent and the 6th cent tax, the county keeps some money because they administer the collections of the sales and use taxes. Then after that, the remaining tax is distributed according to the proportionate population for each eligible entity. And so you look at the population in Albany County, the city, and the town of Rock River, and that's how that tax would get distributed. Like I said before, Albany County, Rock River, the city, those are the 3 entities, local entities that receive sales and use taxes. So about 30% of the state sales and use tax is given to local governments, and it comprises about 24% of the forecasted general fund revenue for the city in fiscal year 2026. So it is not, even though it is a shared tax from the state, it is not an insignificant source of revenue. At any point, please ask questions.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And sorry, I may have just not caught this. So 24% of the 1%? Or 24% of what? Sorry.
24% of the general fund budget is generated from
right there.
The state share of the tax, which I think is something that many people find they don't realize it's that large because it's just a share, but it actually is a fair portion of the general fund's revenue, which is available for those general government purposes. We're going to move on to the next slide now. So let's talk a little bit more about our local, what we would call our local sales and use taxes. The 5th cent sales and use tax requires voter approval every 4 years, so that's the cycle we're on. This tax will also come up for re-election in 2026, and it continues every 4 years to to be on the ballot for voter approval unless the governing bodies adopt a resolution to make the tax permanent. That has not happened in Albany County, so we vote on this tax every 4 years. This tax, again, is distributed according to the population in the county. So just like the state shared tax, this one is distributed in the same way. And this tax is used for general government purposes. So it's our general purpose tax. And for Laramie, the city, this tax, the 5th cent, comprises about 20% of our forecasted general fund revenue for 2026. So between the state share of the 4th cent and the local 5th cent, that's about, I'd have to look at my number from the previous slide, right under 45% of general fund revenue. The topic for this evening is the 6 cent specific purpose tax. This county tax requires voter approval for a set amount of specific projects and, if it's approved by voters, remains in place until the tax is fully collected. So it's a very different thing. And that's why when the tax is discussed between the governing bodies, the amount of tax has to be determined because it is collected until that amount is reached. This tax is also distributed differently. And so the ballot that the voters see and approve, the projects on that ballot are how this tax gets distributed. And so that is different than the population distribution method of the other sales and use taxes. As you all may know, the last specific purpose tax was approved by voters in 2018, and revenue from wind energy development as well as beginning to tax online sales have really accelerated the collection of the 2018 tax. We will be fully collected on the 2018 tax before it is renewed, before it is presented to voters to renew. So I think that's really important to talk about. That does not normally happen in Albany County because we collect a little more slowly. So a really interesting, quick collection cycle on this approved tax. Are there any questions on this slide before I move on?
Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Waite. How long did we expect it to take for that to occur?
Honorable Mayor, through you, thank you for your question, Councilmember Lockhart. I actually went back and listened to the first set of deliberations in 2018 last week, and 10 to 12 years was what was originally estimated. That was a very long 12 years was on the outside of what had typically been considered. I think what was more normal was considering a 10-year tax that always got collected a little bit more quickly, so it ended up being maybe an 8 or 9 year tax. Are there any more
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Do you anticipate this next round to be as quick with the slowdown of the wind energy?
Honorable Mayor, through you, I actually spoke with my peers at the county earlier this week. We do think we have a few years ahead of us, 2 or 3, where we can continue to expect to receive some additional revenue from wind development. And so if the tax is renewed 1 year into that, I think we'll know a little more. I think you could expect in the beginning there will be some of those accelerated collections, but we do not recommend, at least I do not recommend planning as though those collections will continue at the same rate as they did for this tax. Thank you. We'll dive a little deeper into the specific purpose tax on the next slide. This is my most text-heavy slide. Generally, the Laramie, the county, and Rock River collaborate to determine the projected term and amount of the tax. The county, Rock River City can sponsor and have sponsored other organizations receiving benefit from the tax. So the Laramie Regional Airport, we have a representative from Pilot Hill here this evening. It's a normal part of the process where organizations who would be eligible to receive tax also come to the governing bodies and ask them to consider sponsoring them as part of the tax. And so all of this comes into play as the tax is being determined. Really important to remember, again, that it's a county-imposed tax. They're the ones that adopt the ordinance for it, they manage it, and they lead through these conversations, and that's by state statute. So important to remember as we move forward. We have to make certain assumptions about future tax collections when we look at that total term. I'm going to talk a little bit more about assumptions later. I hope you know we can never predict the future with certainty. And so there's a level of risk evaluation and comfort that will go into your working with the county and other agencies to determine how much and how long of a tax you feel comfortable with. The cost of bonding, if we choose to do bonding for any projects, to have the money up front rather than wait as it's collected, will also need to be considered as part of the tax. And I will talk to you about that a little bit more later, because the cost of financing is certainly different than it was in 2018 when we issued the last tax and were approved to issue those bonds. So as we move forward, the governing bodies will be meeting and they will be developing their critical list of projects. So I know the county has been doing this work already. At the city, we're kind of approaching the amount of the tax as the first point of conversation and starting the projects more slowly, because we have time this fall to work on that list of projects. And we know there's a lot of need out there. And so we thought that might be a better approach for this tax than from the beginning having that list of projects slated out. Let me see what else I want to cover on this slide. I want to make sure I point out, some of you may know that the state statute was changed to allow for a municipal specific purpose tax, but that is not what we're talking about. If a government chooses to pursue a voter-approved municipal specific purpose tax, the county in which that city resides has to have adopted the general purpose tax and a specific purpose tax, or the Board of Commissioners must give the city approval to ask the voters to consider that tax. And so if you hear people talk about the municipal specific purpose tax, those are the criteria for enacting it, not what we're talking about this evening. I do want to note that specific purpose taxes cannot fund ordinary operations of the local government unless those operations are related to a specific project. And so, some of you may remember in, I think, 2001, when the specific purpose tax built the rec center, actually, an endowment was created by that tax. That is allowed by state statute because you can create that endowment for that specific purpose and that specific project. And that's actually why that was allowed under state statute at the time. Be happy to pause here if there are any questions. This is my, again, text-heavy slide, and I want to make sure that I don't gloss over anything that you're interested in.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. This might be coming later, but what is the city, county, Rock River, what's our working definition of specific purpose?
Allowed, so that is a great question. I actually have copied a section of text from statute. It is a little paraphrased, and I would defer to the city attorney because I am not an attorney if he thinks I speak incorrectly here. Specific allowed projects include specific purposes. It's literally what it says in the state statute. Maintenance, renovation, or reconstruction of specifically defined roadways. So you may remember the last ballot was really long because there were a lot of potential street projects on it. We wanted to put those projects on it to meet that criteria in state statute. And you also can use the specific purpose tax to fund a reserve. You can invest funds in that reserve, and it can be used as a maintenance fund for a specific project or an endowment for that same purpose. There are a couple of phrases I did not excerpt from state statute, but those were the most, let's say, common in terms of allowable use. So there is some vagueness there.
Thank you. Councilor Newman?
Just wanted clarification. So the three entities that get this, but your last bullet point says that the airport got some in 2018. How is that incorporated? Does it come from the city share, or do we have 4 now?
Honorable Mayor, through you, to answer that question, typically, so one of the 3 governmental entities, or 2 of them, typically it's been the city and the county, will sponsor those organizations with part of their share. I think that's how it's historically been talked about. I'm not saying that I think that's how it needs to be talked about, but I do believe that that has been the practice. You can't just, you have to be a governmental entity. The airport is a joint powers board. That's why they qualify to receive this tax. So it would not be the case that, say, any nonprofit would be able to come to the city or county and just receive, yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. My question, and this might be coming later on too, but just looking at those specific projects. So how this has worked in the past, it sounds like we develop a list of important projects that we want to propose to the county. So Rock River, and then can this funding go to multiple projects? Can we be awarded a project for streets and something else, or is it just one specific project for this SPT?
Honorable Mayor, there are typically several categories of projects, and of course the breadth of that depends on the availability of funding and also the amount of each project, because if you have maybe a really large project, you might have fewer categories than if you had more smaller projects. And so, like for our ballot, the last ballot, we had streets and storm drainage, parks, trails, community enhancements, and several other things I'm forgetting right now. And so I think there were maybe 6 or 7 that voters considered, and underneath those, you provide information about what will be done with those funds. So it's not just street projects, it's street projects to maintain, to rehabilitate these sections of roadway. Yeah.
I see no further questions.
So we'll go to the next slide, and what I've done is compile an overview for you of the past 25 years worth of these taxes. So we're in 2025. I've gone back to 2001. I've given you the amount of total tax that was presented to the voters for approval, and I have given you each entity's, what we'll say, share. What you'll notice about 2001 is that in that year, there was a joint debt service category. I believe what I actually learned from watching the commissioners meeting a couple weeks ago was that I think the county at that time did not have enough bonding capacity to do a project that we were both working on. And so we kind of pooled our resources and worked together and put that item on the tax as a ballot and on the ballot, and voters approved it. So kind of a neat thing. You'll notice in 2018, you'll see the airport. So in that tax, both Laramie and the county sponsored the airport being on the ballot. So 2026 is all TBD. That's what we're talking about now, but it's really important you have a history of what some of these tax amounts and shares have looked like historically. So we'll do a little bit of planning tonight, both in the sense of we need to start wrapping our heads around the amount of tax that you would feel comfortable with proposing from the city standpoint as the maximum, and then you have to think about that. That's what potentially will go to the voters, and are you comfortable with that? And so we say you kind of talk about that maximum amount, and then you look at people's project needs, and that's where the bodies really come together and do hopefully that collaborative negotiating to figure out a solution that works for all of the entities involved. On the next slide, you'll see, as I was doing this presentation this weekend, I was in a mood for some quotes. I did this quite intentionally because I want to make sure that I tell you that there is some risk in economic forecasting, right? We have higher than expected collections now. That's been really nice. I will tell you, I do not think those will continue every year into the next decade. You don't know if there will be an economic contraction. On the other hand, you don't know if there will be more economic expansion. I will tell you, we'll talk about this a little later, our sales tax base is a lot healthier than it was then because of the taxation of online sales. But still, there is some uncertainty. I actually poached the first quote you see from the Government Finance Officers Association conference I went to. I giggled about it, and it says the only function of economic forecasting is to make astrology look respectable. And I thought, well, that's a little much, but I thought about that, and I thought, well, you know, sometimes if we think about the times when things have really changed, I'm not sure how many people knew that was coming. And so you have to be prepared for that idea that there could be some things in the future that may happen that are positive, and boy, that's awesome when it works that way, but are also negative. So I'm going to talk briefly about that in relation to this tax. So this tax, when the voters approve it, if they do, it is in effect until collected. So the risk is that it becomes a longer tax. So if it was initially a 10-year term, and that we really thought that was going to work, but things really slow down, it takes 12 years to collect. So you're not collecting more tax from the voters. You're collecting the same amount, but it's over a longer time. And that's really the risk you're managing when you're thinking about the long-term forecast here. We'll go to the next slide. So we recommend first wrapping your head around the amount and the term of the tax. So historically, what I can tell you about the term is that around 10 years has been used. If you look at 2000, 2010, 2018, 2018 was the longest, 10 to 12 years is what was talked about then. 10 years has typically been the term. That doesn't mean it has to be the term. That's what we've typically done in Albany County. The amount. The amount should absolutely be based on historical collections and projected future growth. I would recommend to you that we not use an average of collections of this last tax, which is what we would normally do, because of that one-time, let's say non-ongoing revenue from wind energy development. And finally, I think that your forecast should also consider a conservative growth rate for your collections into that 10-year term. So if you say, okay, right now my median collections over this tax, that feels like a fairly good measure, is this amount, I'm going to say that that's going to grow by a certain amount each year unless we have economic contraction. You want to use a reasonable measure of that growth. The measure I looked at this weekend was the Fed's 10-year projected growth rate at 2.34%. So you need to consider an inflationary factor when you're looking forward for a period of 10 years. We'll go to the next slide now. So let's talk about some possible options. We have initially Todd Bishop, who is our municipal advisor and also assists the county, was at the commissioner's work session at least earlier in August. I don't know if he was at the last one, and he strongly recommended at that work session against having a tax over $100 million. We would agree with that as staff. That is not our decision, that is up to you, but his experience recommends against that, and he does have many decades of experience doing these taxes across communities in Wyoming. I'll remind you as you're thinking that the taxation of online sales started in 2019, and that was after the 2018 tax had been implemented. So our base collections are indeed healthier, even without those wind energy developments. So if you rewind, I'm going to pause here and say, if you rewind back to 2018, our sales and use tax collections, it was a different world. We got very little. And it was a game changer for local government funding when the taxation of online sales started to occur. And so even though, until wind energy, Albany County was still in the bottom in the per capita collections, it was more than we were used to. And so there was just a little bit more flexibility, and that's why you've seen additional capital investment from the city, because we had healthier revenue sources to be able to do that. Well, of course, then you add that wind energy on top of it, and the council knows from our budget discussions how significant that source of revenue has been. And so I would recommend we not think about that wind energy when we're planning for this tax, or if you do, think about it just a little bit, and you really think about that base that you know is going to be ongoing, if it's important to you to not exceed 10 years. If it's not as important to you, you could think about that. So in the table on this slide, what I've done, yes.
Oh, sorry. Councilor O'Doherty?
So the problem with exceeding 10 years would be if you got a bond that for a project that you expected to pay off in 10 years, but you didn't receive all the money until 12 years? Is that what the danger is of that term?
Honorable Mayor, through you. The way the tax could be managed is you're always going to fund your bonded portion more conservatively and upfront to mitigate against that. So it's more about your tolerance for wanting a longer tax. So there isn't really anything special about the 10 years. You could do a shorter tax. It's just historically that is where we've landed. So those are the scenarios I'm preparing because it's apples to apples in that way. And what I thought, I actually before the meeting thought that what I might do is break these scenarios for you into the yearly amount, so that if when you're meeting with the commissioners, you all start playing with the terms, like the number of years, that would be easy for you to do with these scenarios. And I will present these same scenarios when we meet with the commissioners and town council of Rock River on next Monday. So it'll be the same thing.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. This is really helpful. Would there be any reason to look at a shorter term just based on the inflationary costs of goods right now? I mean, I'm just thinking if we were planning out for 10 years, excuse me, and we see the rising costs that we've seen in this very short term, is there any benefit to that? I mean, I'd just love your opinion on that.
Honorable Mayor, through you, it's really hard to answer that without knowing what the ask of each entity are. I would feel uncomfortable opining on that because you really need to consider the need, and then I think you consider how you get that capital and those types of more detailed decisions.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we take a look at the table and we say a 10-year term, but again, I caveat that and say that's just historical. And we use median tax collections from the 2018 tax. And I looked at this pretty carefully. I've run these numbers by our municipal advisor. He agrees with me in the sense that these are, conservative numbers. And we use an inflationary factor on top of that. We'd land at a tax of about $85.9 million. If we use the average collections for the first 4 years of that tax, when our collections were slower before wind energy happened, and then I use actual inflations on that base for the remaining collections, we'd land at $92.1 million. If you use average tax collections, you'd land at 97.3. That is an aggressive scenario. It's not what I recommend, but it is there for you. That's what we have used before, but we haven't had those one-time revenues before. And so if you hear average collections talked about, I want you to know what's in those. And then finally, the last scenario I provided was just simply inflating the approved 2018 tax for actual inflation that has occurred since 2018. So I went on to the CPI calculator, put in $1 in 2018, $1 in 2025, and that would result in an $83.9 million tax, which is not very far off of the $85.9 million. And so I think that first scenario to me, that's a nice conservative scenario for a 10-year tax. Do you guys have questions about those 4 methodologies that I prepared? Okay, so I think what would be helpful here, and you know, it is divided by 10, so you can just divide that total tax by 10 to get the annual amount, but I think I'm going to prepare that just as a reference for everyone as we start thinking about that term. So the next slide really covers the issuance of bonds for specific purpose tax projects with voter approval. So voters must approve the tax, and they also must approve the issuance of general obligation bonds if we choose to issue them for specific tax, for our SPT projects. Funds from the tax are available as they are collected. And so you have to remember, if you have, let's say you have a project for $8 million that you really want to get done quickly. Those funds are not going to come in for a while. And so if you really need those funds up front and you are willing to pay for the cost of financing in your tax, it can be a good decision to bond. It was an easy decision to bond when the interest rate was less than 1%, which is what it was when we issued the 2018 bonds. We're expecting it's going to be 4%. And just to give you a sense of scale, if we bonded around $21 million for specific purpose tax projects in 2026, the cost of interest on that debt would be $5 million. I mean, so it's a significant decision now. It's been a significant decision before. It's just that it was easy in 2018. That piece was really easy. It's a little bit tougher this time. When you issue bonds, you have to remember that you incur both the legal and finance-related costs to issue those bonds. So you have counsel, you have trust set up, you have bond placement, and then of course you have the interest cost on that debt. And so if you all decide in our list of projects that there are some that we want to bond, that piece of that interest and those issuance costs comes off the top of our projects. And we'll talk a lot more about that later on, but I want to make sure that everyone's really clear on how that works.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Is that on the ballot too? Okay.
Correct.
Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Director Wade. So if we did not, we have a project list, we decided to put it on the ballot, the county supports it, it gets voted for. If we do not go with this bond route, then we wouldn't be able to implement any of the funding into a project until all of it's collected. Is that correct?
Honorable Mayor, through you, no, it's as it's collected. And so let's say the city's share, let's say we got $3 million a year. So you could spend that as it's collected if you choose to go that way, and it could be allocated to those different projects. But you would have to accumulate the funding necessary to do a larger project until you could do it. So if you had some small maintenance type projects, you might be able to complete those in your first year. But let's say if you had a recreation facility for $5 million, you would have to wait until you collected that money, or you'd need to bond it. Or secure, financing. Those are really good questions. Thank you for asking them. So I just want to point out again that our bonds, it was literally like a 0.92 average coupon. It wasn't even 1% for the 2018 tax. The first bonds we issued for 2020 can actually be called, but I'm earning more on the held funds than I would save on the interest, and so we're actually right side up in that equation. And so we are generating more money for projects by not calling those bonds because of how the interest rate environment has changed. And so right now we are planning to continue holding those bonds because we are actually making the most of the tax by making that decision. We'll go to the next slide now. So let's talk about the next steps. You will have several meetings, several joint work sessions with the Town Council of Rock River and the County Commissioners. The first step is going to be talking about the amount of the tax, and we will begin talking about the amount of the tax at our work session next week. You should leave here tonight feeling prepared to have conversations about the amount of that tax in general, and kind of start to develop an idea of what your comfortable with to go into those conversations. I have no idea whether we can predict if that will be decided or what progress will be made, but I would really encourage you to think about what you feel comfortable with for that amount and term of the tax. And that term is what I would say first. So figure out the term. And then you can calculate the amount from there based on the scenario that you find most attractive. And if you want to get in touch with me after this work session and ask me some questions about those forecasts, you know that I'm here for that. So do you guys have any questions before we start talking about the negotiation of the tax, before we move on? About that table. Maybe we could go back to the table, back a slide, 2 slides, because this is going to be a good resource for you.
Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, well, I'll hold off because it's not really about that, but I have some general broad questions that I'm still thinking about, so I'll hold off. Thank you, Director Wade.
Councilor Newman.
So these numbers, though, let's say like all of us put out Facebook posts and we see that like, no, everybody's okay with 100 million or 50 million, right? These are just what staff has came up with, but if we hear that the public wants more or less, we just do this calculation and then that.
Honorable Mayor, through you, that's why I'm advising you the way I'm advising you, so that you have the tools to do that. And so all I have done, as I've stated, is project with a 10-year term, which has been historic. But if you divide those total amounts by 10, you have the per year, and it will be really easy for you to play with those numbers and get to what you think you feel comfortable recommending. Yeah.
I see none.
Okay. Mayor, thank you for letting us go back to those slides and just make sure that everyone feels.
These two are.
Yeah.
Are you guys okay? Yeah. Yeah, they give me headaches.
I was going to suggest that, but I didn't hear.
It's like a disco.
Yeah. That's why I did listen to my kids.
Yes. Disco music.
Yeah, thank you.
Spet taxes and disco.
So we'll be right back where we were on slide 12. Okay. Honorable Mayor, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So so go into the work session having put some thought into that. You'll get a lot of education next week. Hopefully you'll have some great conversations, and hopefully it's a great first meeting for you. The step that comes after that meeting is when you start negotiating the tax. We recommend using a collaborative style, of course, to determine each entity's share. So you're going to go recognizing that trust, to the extent we can build trust between local government entities, we all win. And so going into those meetings with an idea of what the city's needs are, but also going in listening deeply to the needs of other entities is very important, because you all work together to determine the amount of these total taxes. And we can expect, I think, that need is going to be greater than the available tax. And so you have to have that in mind going in. So it's a collaboration, but it's also a negotiation. And there will be a time where it feels like that. And we just want to make sure that you're aware.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We just have a request from the back of the room. If you could speak into your microphones directly. If they're having a difficult time hearing everyone back in the back.
Thank you for the feedback. Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Director Wade, I thought of a question that might be relevant. And just the big picture, for these excise taxes, do they have to be fully collected before you can put another one on a ballot? Would that be a consideration for a 10-year versus a 12-year or whatever amount? Because we wouldn't be able to ever put another one on the ballot until one has been met.
Honorable Mayor, through you, I will tell you that I I do not have the same level of expertise about that as people, my peers would at the county. Generally, you're going to try to time the taxes so that one expires and the collection of the next begins. They don't overlap. And so, yes, you're right. It would take longer to put another one on the ballot for voter consideration if it took longer to collect the tax. Yes.
Thank you.
And so remember that tax amount and the percentage is what's going to end up being discussed and negotiated and deliberated by the governing bodies. Typically for the city, the mayor kind of leads in that negotiation. The mayor can be supported by others. But we would also recommend that you have a strategy and an approach so that there's just a couple or a few designated speakers, because there's 9 of you. There'll be 1 commissioner likely speaking, and so you have to keep that in mind. And so you can start thinking about how that might look, and you can ask the attorney for some guidance or counsel if he can be of assistance in that way. We expect at this time that voters will consider the next specific purpose tax on the ballot in May or August 2026. We do not yet know which one, and county staff are going to provide a little bit more information about that at the upcoming meeting on Monday, because I think they're still considering what they feel is the appropriate timing for this tax, but the county will determine that timing. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to present briefly an overview of what we hear the most about in relation to this tax, and that's the entity share and the project list. I think it's important to know that there tends to always be greater need than taxes available when you go into the first conversations. And I think we also know that the regional airport is going to request a share of the tax and the city to sponsor it. So it's important to consider that you may be asked to support that as part of the city's share, and you may be asked to support other organizations as part of the city's share. And that is absolutely part of the process. And so you're going to be making those determinations as you move along. You also should know, and I hope you all know this already, that the county has stated repeatedly that their need is really great for this tax. And so I'm making sure I say that just in case you haven't heard it, because we need to be aware of what's going on at the other local government entities in Albany County. We have prepared some initial project ideas for the council's consideration. Assistant City Manager Todd Fieser is going to lead you through those tonight, and he'll dive more into kind of that high-level overview with you later. So that wraps up really my section of the content, the overview, the education, some of which you will hear again next week. Do you have any questions for me before I turn it over to Assistant City Manager Fieser?
Questions? Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. This is fantastic. I think there's just one community that has a 7% tax in. So how does that happen? And what's that used for, that 7%?
Honorable Mayor, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to tell you I do not know the exact mechanism. So I know it is Teton County. I know it was for a justice center. I do not know if it was a county specific purpose tax, the 7 cent, or a municipal specific purpose. I would think it was county. But that's the piece I'm not entirely sure about. And so you can bring additional taxes to the ballot. There's a couple of ways you can do that. I suspect, we may talk about that more a little bit later, but tonight I actually thought about including a little bit more there, but I thought it might be a little distracting. Yeah.
Councilor Newman.
Now I want to combine both their questions because so we have the 6 penny. Could we split that, 10 or 12 years and see about the 7th? Not that I support that, but I want to know if I wanted to know if that is a possibility.
Honorable Mayor, through you, I think what you're asking, Councilmember Newman, is if you put the question to the voters for the 6 cent and they approve a 10 or 12-year tax, can you still put the question to the voters about a 7 cent? And the answer to that is yes. Yes.
Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Director Wade. They keep coming to me. This is really fascinating. So you mentioned that the county has repeatedly stated that their need is great. Is that because of property tax loss and revenue this year, or a mixture of things from your understanding?
Honorable Mayor, through you, my position is as the finance director of the city, and I really wouldn't be comfortable opining on the county's revenue. I do think they have a lot of deferred maintenance, and I think they have a lot of needs for some facilities. Yeah.
Can I follow up?
Continue.
Thank you, Mayor. And then is that overall in this process, is that kind of how it goes from year to year? Is that there might be needs for one entity more than another, and so that's kind of what you're highlighting through all this, is that that's part of the negotiation process of like the give and take? Okay, cool.
So Honorable Mayor, to paraphrase, if you look at 2000, I believe that the county and city worked on a project together. The county didn't quite have enough bonding capacity, so we worked together there to figure something out. In 2018, I know the city came in and said, we have so much need in the street. And so we were the organization that came in and said, look, we've really got a lot of need here. In the end, the percentages, I don't think ended up being too far off of what people expected, but there was more need that we articulated. This cycle, the county is saying, hey, we have a lot of need this time. So yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
I see no further. Oh, Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Director. Excellent presentation, a lot of clarity. This might be more answered by Mr. Fieser, but for example, when we're talking about something like a city council or a city and county collaborative project like a joint operations center or something like that, then how does that change the equation in terms of negotiating percentages, allocations, things like that? Or are those sort of set and then those contracts are kind of worked out behind the scenes? Just curious.
Honorable Mayor, through you, it's a negotiation, Councilmember Bowling. And so I think, there have been times, like if you listen to the first work session from 2018, it was held in March. That might be a really great example. I was really glad I did that. It wasn't too much time, and I remembered a lot I had forgotten. And you could see that the city and county had different positions about how to treat sponsoring the airport, and you negotiate through that. But that's exactly the question you asked. Yeah.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, and I have one comment. I believe that the commissioners met yesterday, and I think you're right. So it might behoove us all to watch that meeting from yesterday to just kind of get a sense of where they landed on things as well.
If there are no further
Okay.
questions, I will thank you for your time and turn you over to Mr. Fieser.
Thank you, Director Wade.
Nance, you can go to the next slide.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. It's a pleasure to be here. And I do want to say this openly and on the record that to get the pleasure to work with Director Wade is a joy in my life and has been a joy across my 30-year career in municipal government. Quite frankly, one of the most intelligent, gifted people that I've ever had a chance to work with. So it's really a pleasure to work with her. I did look up the Jackson, the Justice Center, of which Director Wade was right, and it's listed as a 2% SPET, is how it's listed or how it was reported through their newspaper. So we can look into that and see what that means, but it won by a whopping 25 votes. So as Director Wade has indicated, we're really in a realm of a little bit of unknowns. We're unsure of the term, we're unsure of how much tax will be collected or what everybody's comfortable with. And so what we've done is we've actually worked up a list. One of the things I'm not going to do, or we're not going to do tonight, is we're not going to work through a prioritization list. What I'm going to provide for you is some projects that we know have been submitted through city staff, through department directors and managers. So that you're aware of some projects that are on the horizon that we're going to look into. But I fully expect that we will be coming back together and doing a prioritization list that we will send with our negotiating team to go to a meeting in the future with the county and Rock River to work on negotiations to see how this tax will pan out for us. Next slide, please. So there's a few things that we've been working on. The city manager's office and the city has been aware that, yes, go ahead.
Would you tell us what page that is that you're on?
Page
15. So the city manager's office in the city of Laramie, we've been aware that it is time to work on the specific purpose excise tax for 2026. We did ask all the department directors and managers to submit projects of which we brought into our office and started to work some vetting. I will tell you that our initial list was well over $100 million. And as Director Wade has described to you, that doesn't include the county's list, doesn't include Rock River. That's just the city's list of what we identified as specific purpose tax projects or items. Over the past week, Director Wade and I have been working on the projects, what's available, how we could fund different projects different ways as they've been selected, what we could work on, and we've actually managed to whittle the project list down to approximately about $51 million. Now, there's some items that are not in there right now, like we haven't heard from council yet on projects that you may want to see that might not be included on our selection. And so that's what tonight's about, is for us to hear potential projects, not to make a prioritization list, because that's going to take a resolution by council to prioritize a list to make sure that we take it to the negotiating team correctly. The city's manager's office has also received requests for consideration of projects from community partners, which are in the audience tonight, and if you so choose, you could certainly choose to hear from them tonight on their requests. Next slide, please. So we lumped our projects, I believe, into four. Public safety projects is the first one that we've lumped into. As you're aware, from a few weeks ago, council had approved an RFP to work on a joint public service or public safety center, correct? The Laramie Police Department is, quite frankly, undersized. It's in an appropriate building to actually house a police department in. For those of you that don't know, how many people know what that building was before? It was an engineering office, right? It's built by engineers, built on a grass berm. It comes with its own pieces and parts, but the operation and functionality of police departments have simply changed over the years. And right now, it doesn't meet the needs for a functioning police department among community policing and what they do. And so it is worth consideration to look at whether it's a new joint facility with the county and the Fire Station 1, or if it's a standalone facility and it's time for us to start making look at that. And the specific purpose excise tax is a viable option to fund that. Most recently, the last community that I worked in was Cheyenne, and their joint safety service center was funded through specific purpose excise tax right before I left in 2015, I believe. One of the other facilities that we've got that's undersized and aged and is requiring probably consideration for replacement is the Laramie Animal Control Facility. Currently, it's in Labonte Park. It's a small building. It's undersized. We do have some HVAC issues where division of air quality between potentially animals that are in an infirmary versus other animals is an issue. And we've got some issues that we need to deal with at the Laramie Animal Control Facility. Now is a good time to consider that as a project for this community to consider if they would like to fund a facility to support animal control. And finally, Laramie Fire Station 1. How many of you took the tour of Laramie Fire Station 1? Fire services has changed, and Dan eloquently described that at the push-in ceremony for the fire truck that we had when we celebrated the 125th year? 150th year of the Laramie Fire Department. You know, and oddly enough, Dan's only worked for half of those years for the city. If you think about it, when you see Fire Station 1, it's grossly undersized. And we house the largest equipment in the state of Wyoming due to the dorms and the height of the dorms in our fire stations. And right now, we're concerned about replacing the ladder when we have to base it on our facility size to where we can house it instead of basing it on the need for this community. And so those are three projects that fall in public safety projects that are worth consideration as we move forward. Next slide, please. The next category that we've got are public works projects. Street projects. In the last specific purpose tax ballot, there was $23 million awarded to street and stormwater projects. As those were listed, as you may have seen the ballot, almost every street in the city of Laramie was listed, so it could be considered for use of those funds. And then specific stormwater projects were listed so that they could be used for that. Again, with our PCI, as you're all aware, our roads continue to degrade. They're hard to keep up with. It's infrastructure that's critical to operations. It's critical to our citizens so that they can get around safely. It's important to continue to look at funding street projects through the specific purpose excise tax. Stormwater projects is another one. I know we've all been discussing the surface water drainage utility fund fee over the past few months, and it's time to think about, do we continue to have projects on there not knowing the certainty of what that fund will potentially bring, if it will still be in existence? And so these are going to be moving concurrently, and that's why we haven't come to you with project amounts, because we're unsure where that surface water drainage utility fee fund is going to land, and we're unsure about where the specific purpose tax ballot is moving. But we have time to work through this as it goes through the process to know that we're lining up projects that may support continuing that based on the outcome of what's happening with the surface water drainage fee. Another project that's been very popular on this specific purpose excise ballot has been source water protection projects, and that basically refers to the Casper Aquifer Protection Plan. These projects include the installation of monitoring wells along I-80 in case there were any spills, and then a monitoring program for the next 10 years that will monitor those wells and add more wells as needed throughout the Casper Aquifer to make sure that our aquifer stays safe for our source water. And then the final one of our major street projects that we really like that's coming forward, you should see it under construction, part of it under construction, which is Bill Nye Phase 2. But Bill Nye's Phase 3 really has some significant improvements for the south travel of this community and may be worthy of a consideration for a specific project on the next specific purpose excise tax. Next slide, please. This next section is on quality of life projects. As you know, in council goals this year, you wanted to look at community sports facilities and the economic development, what we may need to do. We believe it may be appropriate to have a placeholder of funds available for future community sports facilities that come out of that project. The RFQ for that project has been let. We expect to be back in front of council probably within about 4 weeks with an award, and to get that study underway. That study is moving concurrently with the change of a tax, right? And we're going to make sure that we're prepared to have some funding to implement some pieces of that study so that it's available pending the outcome of that study. Now, we cannot say what the outcome of that study is, so we'll have to figure out what language is legally permissible to do that, which we'll do with our city attorney. A few things in the parks realm that we've got to work on. West Laramie Park, Laramie's last park desert, which is an area that's divided by geography or divided by roads or divided by railroads or such, that is without a park. And that's in West Laramie, south of Snowy Range Road, basically out by Wildtech. That entire area is divided by state highways and interstate, 2 state highways, 230 going one way, 130 going one way, the Interstate 80, and that area in that community is without a park at this point. Another one is the Washington Park wading pool replacement. That wading pool has aged. It's starting to get to the point where we can no longer continue to service the cracks, and we may need to look at a different format of some use in there that may require less staff, could maintain itself, could still provide a water opportunity for kids to enjoy. And so that's one thing that's on there. And the Undyne Park splash pad is in need of renovation and different uses, different chemical treatments, different ways to treat that water to keep it safe, and different uses as we move forward. The Laramie Community Recreation Center is moving past 25 years in existence, and by the time this tax is coming, but the bright, shiny rec center that was 25 years ago is going to continue to need some maintenance. I don't know how many people have been in the pool area lately, but the pool deck has began to erode, simply because of grease and feet and chemicals and all the stuff that comes together. It starts to erode concrete out. Well, projects like that are very expensive to take on and to fix, and there's some projects that we could do in there, whether it's locker room remodels, some other things, to continue to keep that rec center a shining star in our community. Next slide, please. And then finally, we do have 2 community project requests. Probably you will see, and if you allow it tonight, you will hear from the Laramie Regional Airport and the Pilot Hill project on potential requests that they would like to make. Next slide, please. this is the one area where we haven't heard from council, and this is where I'd like to open up to you guys to see if there are any projects that this council has thought of that is on top of mind, anything that we've missed, anything you would like us to consider, because what we are looking to do, and if we don't hear them tonight, I would just ask that you get them submitted within the next week so that we can assess them, talk about them, work on them, try to figure out how to work them into the tax and see if they fit our needs and fit the needs and desires of which you will make the decision as we move forward anyway. So, does anybody have anything they would like to suggest at this point?
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. And, I just continue to think about that Connecting West Laramie study and the potential projects that could happen that were kind of outlined in that, for me, would be really interesting. I don't believe that we have sources of funding to actually implement that at this time, but maybe I'm not remembering well either.
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor, or to Vice Mayor Richardson, you're correct. There is no funding to implement those projects. One of those projects is one that we've already got under design and moving forward, which is the West Laramie West Side Connector. And through our recent work recently, it was on the list for projects for the potential 2026 specific purpose excise tax ballot. However, Director Wade and I believe that there's funding in the current SPT because we were so successful with the Ward grant that may allow us to actually construct that under this current SPT ballot and get that first project in that Reconnect West, which is that connector from Pierce to Snowy Range Road using Madison Avenue, I believe. So there is an opportunity that we could potentially get there with that at this project.
Councilor Lockhart? Oh, sorry, Director Wade.
I thought it might be nice for the council if Assistant City Manager Fieser just provided a sense of the magnitude of the WARG awards that you have secured to make our SPT tax, our current one, go further.
Yeah, as Director Wade had indicated, the projects in the SPT are specific, and one of those projects was Spring Creek Trail Phase 1, and the other one that was really specific was Spring Creek Trail Phase 2. The rest of it was for expansion of the Laramie Greenbelt. Spring Creek Trail Phase 1 was supported by $500,000 from TAP. And keep in mind that that project was advanced through not only a TAP grant at $45,000, but a $500,000 TAP, which was $1 million project, and we only ended up spending $500,000 of that project.
Councilor O'Doherty?
For everyone, would you remind us what TAP is?
Transportation Alternatives Program funding through the Federal Highway Administration. And then here most recently, I'm sure you're all aware, we had applied for a Ward grant to provide upwards of $2.3 million in funding towards Spring Creek Trail Phase 2, which will get us all the way from LaPrelle Park to 9th Street, and that was awarded. And we only expect to expend out of that SPT about $250,000. And so we've really expanded the ability of the SPT through grants to continue to cover lots of space as we move through. WARG is the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant Program.
Councilor Lockhart?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Assistant Manager Fieser. I don't have any new ideas, but the ones that were on my mind before we got to the slide, of course, is stormwater. That's a huge one. I mean, that's the hot topic of discussion, right? But also, I keep on being talked to from people about the community sports facilities. And I know we have the RFQ out, which is fantastic, but I hear it almost every day, and then you look at what Casper did, and I've heard some ideas of what we could do in town from different individuals, so I'm glad that's one of the ideas that you guys have going forward too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. And can you remind us, is there a Phase 3 to that trail that would be proposed into, and could that be included in this, or is there additional funding that you've sought for that?
Although I talk about Spring Creek Trail Phase 2 going to 9th, it actually turns the corner and heads south on 9th Street to the new development, which is, I believe, Spring Creek Village. The developer is actually required to build Spring Creek Trail Phase 3 down to the creek, or what would be the future Boswell Drive, or Bill Nye. I think Bill Nye is what it's named.
Yeah.
And so the Bill Nye project that is in there as a major street project potential would build the river crossing and tie it to the connection at the Maverick, which is already built. So there are plans to get us all the way to 3rd Street at this point.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. And then would there ever, follow up?
Continue.
Thank you. Would there ever be then an opportunity, because I could just envision that then, like you cross Third magically, like all the traffic would stop, and then wrap that around to the park, the depot park, that then wraps to the walk bridge and then back, that we have this whole system that eventually connects.
Your Honorable Mayor, through you to Vice Mayor Richardson, your pathways
My
that go
pathway like this. Yes.
are similar to mine. I actually have a vision where we'd cross 3rd Street, use the I-80 overpass over the railroad, and then connect to the Greenbelt at that point at the kind of the tri-hydro back in there. I think they're both viable visions. One of the projects that was proposed by our new Parks and Rec Director was a Laramie Trails Master Plan that could look at that. Director Wade and I believe that should be funded by a different source than the SPT.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Assistant City Manager. Really helpful, and I think all these projects are really important. And I think I would just highlight, I know the need for kind of a joint public safety office with the city and county. It sounds like that could be a really interesting one in this conversation moving forward, because they could potentially, put in some funding, so could we, and divide that percentage up. But the two projects that I hear a lot, and Councilor Lockhart just mentioned it, but, stormwater projects, regardless of who knows what happens with the stormwater fee and what that shakes out to be in the future months. But either way, some of these capital projects, I think that would be, whether that's because we have no fee and this is how we accomplish it, or it can take some of the burden off that fee by supplementing it with this. I think that would be a really great idea. And then, under street projects, I think, I hear about it all the time, is paving West Laramie. I know you all have heard about that for your whole careers, but, trying to focus on some street projects over there in addition to what we're already working on. Thanks.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. I also kind of wonder just about public transit in general, and then specifically maybe service to West Laramie. So the Vice Mayor kind of mentioned some of that. And then I also really appreciate the Laramie Animal Control idea, just with some of the urban renewal stuff happening, wondering if that can run concurrently with some of that stuff. And so, good Lordy, if I had $100 million.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor O'Doherty.
I think if Councilor Shumway were here, he probably, because when we talked about TAP, he and I talked about sidewalk accessibility and what we can do to improve sidewalks. And he said, well, other communities have used TAP funds for that. Well, we were able to use the TAP funds for our Greenbelt, but we still need the sidewalks. And I know the sidewalks are the responsibility of the owner of that property, but I don't know if there's a way to have, especially on Spring Creek, the road Spring Creek, those sidewalks, and it's because of water, are just, falling in. So is there any way to I don't know if sidewalks are just accessibility options, if that could be a special purpose, or is that too vague?
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor O'Doherty. No, I don't believe it's too vague to be a special purpose. We have to identify the sidewalks in general that we're going to do, or the roads, as you do with the street projects, right? I think the thing that we got to remember and talk about, some of these projects, public transportation and sidewalks, are huge, and there is a limited amount of tax that a lot of people are all going to be going for, which is going to be part of that negotiation fees. And we're happy to add those on and assess them and talk about them. We did recently finish the LiDAR, which showed that I think that we're working on the data at this point, and it hasn't been released yet, but it will give us an idea on what sidewalk replacement is, and potentially if this council chooses to put specific purpose excise tax funds towards sidewalks, that is a viable thing that can be written legally to support.
Councilor Freed.
Mayor, could I ask a question? Is that okay?
What?
Could I ask a question to Assistant City Manager?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about all these projects that we put forward, and maybe just some background or context would be my question. Has there been certain topics that have come before the county and they haven't wanted to support? And likewise, have there been things that the public hasn't voted for historically here? Like if we know the rec center, it got voted for to be built in 2001, but do we have any context to understand if we might really like sidewalks or accessibility, but we're also thinking, in addition to this negotiation with the county, we're also asking voters to vote for it. Is there any suggestions you would have that include kind of historical trends or knowing what the community's voted for or against, or is that kind of what we're seeing here?
Honorable Mayor, through you to Councilor Freed, since 2001, this community has enacted a 6-penny, rather by good majority of vote. That 2001 vote actually included the rec center, which I believe had failed twice before it even came here, before it even passed in 2001. And when I was in Cheyenne, I had 2 failed attempts on a rec center over there too, and they're hard projects to get forward. But as you develop a ballot and as you work on negotiations, whoever the negotiating team does become, it's important to think about projects that the community will support, right? And to think about it in that vein, you can think that one of the projects is the greatest project ever, but it doesn't make any sense. I'll even point out that Bill Nye Phase 3, I love that project because it is a major corridor to get up to the high school and will alleviate traffic, I believe, on Grand Avenue and some of the other thoroughfares in this community. The community may not see it that exact same way, and so we really got to balance that desire. So as of history with Laramie, I don't believe that there's any trend or any specific project that wouldn't be supported, because this community has always been very good about their support of the county and the city and the specific purpose excise tax and the 5th penny for that fact.
Councilor Doherty.
I would say that was because the previous council and the staff were very judicious about putting things in there that were palatable and not have poison pills that would ruin it, I think.
Honorable Mayor, if I could add, if you think about some of the projects that we're proposing, quite frankly, the city of Laramie has the best police department, the best fire department in the state of Wyoming.
Absolutely.
And it's something that our community could rally behind and really support. Because quite frankly, those 2 teams are led by amazing people that provide great projects.
Can we speak up a little bit?
It's such a long range.
Okay.
I wonder if you might want to sit a little further forward. Okay. Maybe just lift the...
Lift the microphone. I have a question.
Can you repeat what you just said for the people in the back? If you could hold the mic.
About the police and fire department?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, quite frankly, when you're working on projects, it's important to think about what this community will support. Quite frankly, our fire department, our police department are the best in the state that I believe this community could rally around and support a project of those natures.
Vice Mayor.
Mayor, I wonder if there might be an opportunity to hear from the airport and the Pilot Hill if we're done with this comment. But it looks like there are some more questions.
I think we should finish questions.
Yep.
Councilor Bowling, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director. Directors, managers.
But you could just call me Todd.
On a tear today. This is just a broad hypothetical for me, but is there any thought about wisdom in or historical precedent for, so we have this kind of history of 10-year grant cycles or 10-year tax cycles, collection cycles. Is there precedent for, and I know there's a lot of bodies that are involved in the negotiation, but a much smaller negotiation of that scope, right? Looking at smaller projects funded over 3 to 5 years or anything like that, is that part of like a trend for municipalities that you know of?
Honorable Mayor, through you, I would say that it is probably not a trend due to uncertainty that it creates, right? If you extend out and you project a ballot that's sizable that you believe your community will support, it can provide certainty for your city staff as they work through the projects and provide those. Whereas the amount of work that really goes into a specific purpose tax ballot, not only on the staff side, but the county side with running an election and the other pieces, it also drives up the cost to continue to renew those ballots in a quicker path. So that would be my personal opinion, is that short 3 to 5 year terms on taxes is very hard to manage, especially when you're looking at project needs from the city or the county or Rock River that are probably as great as they are over the next time period.
Councillor Newman.
Mine's more a comment, I guess. I'll send you an email of some ideas that I have instead of putting them out. But I think as council, this would be a good time to use our social media, like I said earlier, and get that out there. And maybe it would help our survey responses going forward as well, on what the public wants to see and what we spend their money on. Just kind of a thought.
And when you send that list out to Mr. Fieser, will you also include council of the list of ideas?
Can I send it to city clerk, or how's this work?
Tell us if you have them.
Or send it to the city clerk and she can share with council?
Yeah.
Would that be, if council have ideas that they want to put out there, should they send them to you rather than communicate with council, and then you can send them out to council? Yes.
Mayor, the important thing is the council doesn't start an email chatter amongst themselves. Who you send it to is the material.
Okay. So you can send an email, do not respond to all to the email. Any other questions or comments at this time? All right, so then we would either Pilot Hill or the airport representatives wish to speak? Yes.
Let's let them go. Then I have one more.
Okay. Good evening, Ms. Terrell, Director Terrell.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and council members. Real quickly, I don't want to spend much time up here because I know there's a lot going on with all of this. I wanted to talk about the infrastructure at the airport, and we've talked a little bit about where we're at. Currently, when we took over the airport or changed, we were making about $1.1 million a year. This year, we made about $2.9 million. That is net, or that is gross, excuse me. With that being said, I'm looking at our 5-year, 10-year forecast to see where we're going to be. We have maximized all of our revenue streams at the airport. As compliance continues to change, and the cost of running this airport is going to go up, the cost to the city and county will continue to go up unless we have some long-term revenue sustainability. So we have put in, I presented to the county, and I'm certainly willing to come in and present to the city as well, for a hangar. What the hangar would do is it's a shorter-term revenue stream. We are looking at a long-term land plan, and what we can develop out there. We have that land for development. We're working with the Wyoming Business Council. Until then, I think we want to look at something in the short term for sustainability to maximize or to create another revenue stream out there. So the airport did put in for a hangar. That is something that we can generate revenue as quickly as we can get that up. So I certainly am available for questions, can talk through it, come do the presentation. But I did want to say, as we start to think about where this community is and the infrastructure and what the airport brings to both the city and the county, I think it is important to create this revenue stream so we're not standing in front of you every year asking for more money. So I just wanted to say I'm available for questions. If you'd like a presentation, I'm sure that the city can reach out to us and we can bring our presentation in. But as we start to talk about the special purpose tax, I will just show up, be available for questions, but that is really what our ask is for.
Thank you, Director. Does anyone have any questions for Director Terrell at this time? You'd like to see I would like to see the presentation.
Perfect.
So we will work that out.
I will get on your agenda and come in and present what the airport is asking in the presentation.
All right.
Thank you for your
very
time.
much. Thank you. And Sarah Brown Matthews, Executive Director, Pilot Hill. Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner, or City Council members, excuse me. Thank you for the time. I also will keep this short and gauge your interest if you'd like a further presentation. We're kind of in a similar situation with the airport in that we are looking at our future and the sustainability of the Pilot Hill area. We started this project in 2017 and were able to open the property to the community for recreation and for wildlife habitat protection and protection of the aquifer recharge area in 2020. Since then, it's been about 5 years. We've invested about $5.5 million in infrastructure in the area. And as we wrap up all the trails this summer and we finish our trailhead, which we hope to open this fall, maybe in time for the middle school track meet, we'll see. But we recognize that the challenge now is going to be maintenance and ongoing management of the property. The grants that Todd was so lucky to secure, we were also really fortunate to be able to obtain quite a bit of the funding for our infrastructure came from ward grants, but the reality is that there are not a lot of funders, either private or grants, that really are interested in operations costs. And we anticipate that this property, 11 square miles, will cost around $250,000 to $300,000 annually. And I can break down those figures for you. What we hope to do is establish a trust similar to what was done with the rec center so that there is an operating fund that will generate revenue so that we also won't be coming back to you every year and saying that we need money to help manage the property. And that's our ask. We're asking both the county and the city to consider whether or not there could be a carve out of a portion of the SPET funds that could go into a trust that would be administered by either the city or the county. That needs to be worked out to support the operations in the ongoing project. Pilot Hill also does have a little bit of an opportunity to create revenue. We do charge now for events, and once our facility is open and we don't have porta potties that blow over, we'll be able to charge a little bit more as users use the property. And we also recognize that we will be helping fortuitously with the completion of the project to generate some of the sales and use tax that will be coming if this sixth penny tax passes. Our economic analysis indicates that about $5.5 million should be added revenue to the coffers with the Pilot Hill area. So we're addressing some of the needs that the community has in terms of wanting more access to recreation, but we also recognize that we need to create a fund and also work with private funders to establish an endowment that'll maintain this in perpetuity. So that will be our ask.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Are there any questions?
Further details?
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Just real quick, Sarah, if you could remind us, we had talked earlier about this not being able to be used for nonprofits, and your relationship with the county that could allow this to be, potentially allow this to be allowable.
Yeah, thank you so much. The Pilot Hill structure is unique in that the majority of the property on Pilot Hill is government land. It's owned by the state of Wyoming. State school trust lands, those leases are held by the county, and annually we pay lease fees of about $41,000 to the state for those. That money, of course, is used to support our local schools. The other largest landholder in the property is the University of Wyoming. They purchased $2 million worth north of the initial land, and so that is also government land. So the understanding that we have, and we have asked the county attorney at the county to make sure that she checks with the AG and that this is a legal project, but that our understanding is that funds from the SPET can be used to create trusts that support government lands and through government entities. So again, this trust would have to be held by either the county or the city, and then would work through a management agreement, which we already have in place with both the university and the county for Pilot Hill then to be kind of your pseudo parks department just for the Pilot Hill area. And that's how that would work. This trust, of course, would be set up in a way that if, for some reason, that project were ever to fold, those monies would stay and revert back to the coffers of the city and the county. So it wouldn't be a privately held trust that couldn't be accessed.
Thank you. Further questions? Councilor Fareed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Sarah. I guess just a comment, but I'd like to see a presentation from the airport and Pilot Hill, I think for the public's knowledge and for ours, if we're going to advocate for this, I think that would be helpful.
I see general agreement that we would like presentations from both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bowling, did you have a question or comment?
It's just a comment and an add-on. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. To tack on to Councilor Freed there, especially with the airport board, with a presentation that the commissioners have already seen, if there's any way we could get some of those materials in advance of Monday. I know it's unlikely that we can have another work session presentation before then, but given that they've already seen it, if there's at least some preliminary materials that we can review in advance of that joint work session, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor O'Doherty. That was loud enough. Huh?
Couldn't we watch the county commission meeting? Is that where you presented these things, or at a county commission work session?
I can't speak for the airport, but I did make a brief presentation to the county commissioners at their meeting this week, and I did send just a brief proposal to the city as well, and I'm sure those materials are available to you. You certainly can watch that presentation, or I can come back and give a similar presentation at your pleasure.
And Director Terrell?
For the airport, I was out of town. Our ops manager gave the presentation. I can put something together and get it emailed over to you, so we can send it out, and then I'll put all my information and be available for any questions.
Wonderful.
So I will put it all down for you.
Thank you so much. Good question. Anything else? That's right. You had one or two more things.
Honorable Mayor, I was just going to try to do a little closing for you guys tonight. First off, on behalf of Jennifer, Director Wade, and myself, we hope that we gave you the tools for your first meeting when you go with the county commissioners on Monday, of which I believe we'll both be in attendance at anyway, be able to answer any questions that you may have as you go through that meeting. But as I look forward and next steps, I think there's some things to think about as a council. Is first off, appointing somebody to negotiate. It's typically been the mayor, but there maybe want to have some support people with you, Mayor, and we didn't probably think about a resolution that aligns the staff to do that. And then for us, it's going to be a resolution of project priorities so that we can have that when you get into negotiations with the commissioners in Rock River. So those are two work items that we will have going on in the future. And again, we're happy to answer any questions. We're both here for you if you have any questions outside of the meeting tonight also.
Thank you. All right. I would like to ask for public comment on this agenda item. Yes. Thank you, and if you can state your name for the record.
I'm Joan Martindale. I'm a Laramie resident.
Yes.
Mayor, is it appropriate, can we ask Director Wade a couple of questions about her presentation? It's just a couple, or I can just ask you and maybe you can, pardon? Oh.
Realistically, all comments are addressed to.
All comments should be addressed to council.
Okay, well,
But then we,
okay, all right.
and thank you very much, Joan, for asking.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So my first question is, Director Wade said that she hasn't called the bonds because she's making more money with not calling them right now. And I'm just curious how long she can hold those bonds and continue making money on them.
Okay.
As a business owner, I deal with money every day.
Yes.
So that was my first question.
Okay.
And then my second comment was, I had to make notes because I can't remember. So she said that the 6-cent specific purpose tax has already paid for itself, has already been collected? Is that?
As of, it's nearing the end of collection.
It's nearing the end, okay. So if it is collected before the next vote, then does that tax stop? As a business person, do I quit collecting the 6-cent? Or does it just get accrued in an account and then able to use at a later date?
Good questions. So, Director Wade, could you address, please, the bond question?
No, those were my two questions. Thank you, Counselor. Okay.
I thought too.
I had another one, but it's okay. It's not important. Thank you.
I'm really happy to answer those questions, and I'm glad you asked. Regarding the bonds, as I look at the interest forecast that I see for the upcoming year, because our interest payments are under 1%.
Right.
Our interest earnings are over 3%, and I don't think that's going to change. It was a 10-year debt issuance, and the bonds were issued in 2020. And so I will continue evaluating. I can call them anytime. And if that interest rate environment changes and it's then beneficial to call them, I will. But right now, it's so early in that debt service, to mature the debt would take millions of dollars that we're actually earning a fair amount of interest on. And so I don't know if we've seen this before. We feel really lucky to be in this situation. And regarding your second question, what I think you heard me say, which is true, is that the tax will lapse before the next one is on the ballot. And so I think that would be a great thing to have the folks at the county address on Monday for local business owners on how that will be handled. I'm not an expert in that, but I am happy to reach out to them and tell them there's interest and ask them to speak about it.
Okay, that would be great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right. Further public comment? And can I ask for some clarification, Director Wade? So it is actually the county that manages the collection of and that type of thing. So the city does not manage that. So through our negotiations, we receive a percent sum, but we don't actually manage the collection of the tax. That is done through the county.
Correct, Honorable Mayor. 1% of the total tax adopted goes to the county for those purposes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So Monday, that would be something that we could talk about. Thank you. Any further public comment? Well, thank you all very much for attending, for your participation.
Sorry to interrupt. Can we just share with the public where the Monday meeting will be?
That's a great idea.
Oh,
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
So the Monday meeting is at 6 o'clock at the Municipal Operations Center at the end of 3rd Street. So please feel free to come out and join us.
All right. Well, this meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.